The Devils continue to make moves. They reunited with a familiar friend. I hope you're in the mood for some tuna. Has Tom Fitzgerald been doing a good job to kick off free agency? And also, Brenden Dillon had his first media availability as a member of the Devils. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. This is my 8th episode in the last 9 days because ever since the Stanley Cup final concluded, it's been non-stop action. We've had the NHL draft, development camp, and the first couple days of free agency, and the Devils continue to make move after move after move. A little bit of a fun fact regarding yesterday's episode, that was one of, if not the hardest episode I've ever had to record and edit because the amount of content that I had to include into one particular episode. Because like I said, the Devils got busy at the start of free agency, and I covered like 4 different players and what each of them brings to the roster and how it improved the Devils roster in general. Not only that, but I attended their media availabilities. So I have to try to like separate the sound bites and see like which one I could plug in. Does this make sense? Do I have to cut something out? It was not a fun episode to edit. It was fun to record because, like I said, I've been enjoying the moves that Tom Fitzgerald has been making. But man, can we just slow down for just a minute? It's been non-stop ever since the Stanley Cup final. But I guess I really shouldn't complain. I get to talk about hockey as one of my professions. But let's talk about another move that the Devils made recently. They reunited with another familiar face. I hope you're in the mood for some tuna from Wawa because Tomas Tatar signed a 1-year contract worth $1.8 million. All right, let's reminisce over Tomas Tatar, shall we? As we all know, last summer, Tomas Tatar was an unrestricted free agent. And I was projecting for him to return to the Devils on a cheap deal. However, he sort of went radio silent. We didn't really have an update as to where was he going to land. There were reports saying that he might end up with the Islanders, the Penguins, but months had passed and Tatar was still available. And I was rather confused because the Devils just had a historic season and Tatar was an underrated asset. And once the Devils got Tyler Toffoli, I knew that there was no chance that Tatar would return to the Devils because there was just no room for him. Mainly due to the fact that the Devils wanted to give Alexander Holtz a bigger chance. They also wanted to give some other guys in Utica a chance. And Toffoli sort of took Tatar's spot at the top 6. And I just said there was nowhere to plug in Tatar where he could comfortably fit. So I just came to the conclusion that his days as a Devil were outnumbered. It was later revealed that Tatar had swapped agents, which is why he went MIA for a while. And then he ended up signing a 1-year deal with the Colorado Avalanche on a very cheap contract that, quite honestly, the Devils could have afforded. In late summer, I did an episode saying, like, if the Devils did not get Tyler Toffoli, I was more than open to bring back Tomas Tatar. Once the offseason rolled out for the Devils, I said, look, maybe they should entertain the thought of bringing back Tomas Tatar because, like I said, he played a big role during the 2022-2023 historic season for the Devils, and he might come cheap, and I think he would be a good complementary piece next to Nico Hischier. I don't really know, but why not bring back Tomas Tatar and get the old band back together? And lo and behold, welcome back Tuna. And it's not just Tuna. I also talked about Adam Henrique because Rico is a fan favorite, but it seems like we always have this discussion year after year after year about Adam Henrique reuniting with the Devils. The thing is, I've been talking about a possible reunion between the Devils and Adam Henrique for quite some time. I did a silly season episode in late May. I did one in January prior to the trade deadline. I think I alluded to it sometime in November when I was covering the Ducks and Devils game, and that was the matchup in which Henrique netted his first career hat trick, and he had nothing but positive things to say about New Jersey. And I remember asking someone who covered the Ducks, like, would Adam Henrique be open to being traded back to New Jersey? And he said yes. And quite honestly, depending on how his contract goes with the Edmonton Oilers, if there's any weird circumstance in which he needs to be dealt out of there, then I'm sure I'm going to have another discussion about Henrique coming back to the Devils. But it seems like a far-fetched idea. It wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last time that I mention Henrique and the Devils coming together yet again. And for Stefan Noesen, I actually have a funny story to share with you guys. I don't know how you're going to feel about it, but years ago, when I was growing up in Michigan and during my middle school and high school days, I had a job as a mop boy for the University of Detroit Mercy men's basketball team. And I was always positioned next to the dance team. I sat next to the basket because my job included me sweeping up the floors, retrieving any basketballs that went out of play, rebounding for the team during shoot around. And Stefan Noesen's wife was on the dance team for my first 2 years there. I was there for a total of 6 years. So a little bit of a weird connection in a sense, but it goes to show you how small the world is. And I just wanted to share that funny story. I highly doubt she remembers me, but I just wanted to share that with you guys. Maybe that's why I was a little biased as to why I said the Devils should pursue Noesen during free agency. But in all honesty, Noesen is a very good player. Let's circle back to Tomas Tatar because I am through the roof right now because, like I said, I've done silly season discussions in the past talking about Tatar and also Noesen, and it's come into fruition, and I'm glad that the Devils are sort of getting the band back together. Now, I got to keep myself honest. Tatar didn't have the best season this past year while playing for the Colorado Avalanche and Seattle Kraken. In 27 games for the Avalanche, he only racked up 1 goal and 8 assists. And then for the Kraken, he had 8 goals, 7 assists in 43 games. He joined Colorado after spending 2 seasons with New Jersey. And like I said, Tatar played a big role on the Devils roster, and he was one of the reasons why they were able to make it to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, because he was a good complementary piece next to Nico Hischier and also Dawson Mercer. I would say that was one of the best offensive lines for the Devils that season. And a little bit of a fun fact for you, courtesy of New Jersey Devils on the Rush podcast hosted by my buddy Alex Chabansi, the Devils dominated teams when Hischier and Tatar were on the ice together. They had an expected goals percentage of 64.2. Goes to show you that Tatar and Hischier, I guess they're the new peanut butter and jelly. However, going back to the 2022-2023 season, he suited up in all 82 games. He had 20 goals, 28 assists for a grand total of 48 points. But the one thing I want to highlight is that he holds the 3rd highest plus-minus rating in a single New Jersey season with a plus-minus rating of plus 41 during the 2022-2023 season. Unfortunately, similar to a lot of his teammates, he didn't really elevate his game come playoff time. He appeared in 12 postseason games and he only racked up 1 goal. But it doesn't take away from the fact that Tatar was an underrated asset on the Devils roster. Now, the thing is like, what will his role be? Can he repeat the same success that he had with Nico Hischier? If I'm being honest, I wouldn't bet on it, but I wouldn't count out Tatar either. I think what Tatar's role is going to be is that he's sort of going to replace Alexander Holt's scoring production. As we all know, Alexander Holtz was a decent scorer. What his Achilles heel was, he wasn't really a good puck handler, and his defense was also a bit of a struggle. But with Tatar, he's capable of scoring and also being a little more efficient. I think that's the role that Tatar is going to slide into, because the name of the game for the Devils this offseason was to find more depth assets, and Tatar is definitely a depth piece. And people are complaining about him getting a bit of a pay increase because of a down year. Like I said moments ago, he signed a one-year contract worth $1.8 million. But come on, guys, it's for one season. I don't think that's make or break for the Devils. And honestly, if the Devils need to trade him away, I think they are more than capable of doing so. But I don't think that contract is bad in any which sort of way. I think people are just trying to find a way to complain about it. But once again, Tatar, during the historic season, he found great success next to Nico Hischier. He could play alongside Nico Hischier, but I think his main role is to basically replace Alexander Holtz and his scoring production. And we'll see what Tom Fitzgerald does the rest of the offseason. When this episode goes live, he is set to meet with the media in a few hours. I love Tomas Tatar back with the Devils, and it's something I've been talking about for almost a year, and I'm glad that he is now back in a Devil sweater. Welcome back, Tuna. Let's see if you could repeat that success that you had a couple seasons ago. Now, before we talk about Brenden Dillon and his media availability, I want to tell you guys about FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sponsor of Major League Baseball. Visit FanDuel.com to look at the odds. And please remember to always gamble responsibly. Okay, Brenden Dillon had his media availability, and I had the chance to ask him a couple questions. I mentioned it in yesterday's episode how the Devils' blue line was very inexperienced and young, and they got exposed a lot. And injuries to Siegenthaler and Hamilton certainly didn't make things any easier. I had the chance to ask Dillon how he feels like his leadership can play a big part both on the ice and in the locker room. Here's what he had to say. Brenden, welcome to New Jersey. Once again, you've been in the league for quite some time and have been to the playoffs 9 times in your career. How do you see your leadership and experience helping out this Devils team, whether it's on the ice or in the locker room?
Yeah, thank you, Trey. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm a big rah talk after every period, and there's different ways that guys can be leaders, and I'm sure that I've heard nothing but good things about the Devils group of guys in the locker room, and I think for myself, I like to just first and foremost kind of try and lead by example, and all I can really be is Brenden Dillon. If I come in and try to be somebody else, I feel like in our league you can tell pretty easily, when someone's being fake or phony. So, I just try to, again, just kind of work hard, try to show that I'm trying to get better at my game to overall be able to help the greater of the team, the New Jersey Devils, get better. And there's, of course, a time and a place when conversations need to be had. I think for a group, I think when cultures are at the all-time high, I was fortunate to have in San Jose some of the best, and Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau and Joe Pavelski and Brent Burns be able to show me as a young player in this league what leadership was like, and all those guys led different ways. And whether that's a wake-up call for our group in between a period when we don't have our best, or there's a tough stretch of the year. 82 games is a long time, and you're going to have your highs and lows and some adversity in there where not just the coaching staff should have to come in and talk. And I've been fortunate to be able to be in the league for a couple of years now, where I've had some experience with those, and whether it's a young guy or veteran guys, we're all going to go through our struggles individually. And I think when we're a tight knit group, we know we can pick a guy up. We know we can talk amongst each other and just be honest too. When you start kind of just trying to go around what the actual root of the problem is, or why things might not be going the best way. You're just wasting each other's time, and those honest conversations in our game, I feel like sometimes usually bring out the best.
I know that Dillon is trying to be humble. He's the new guy, and he has to get accustomed to the Devils culture and locker room. But the thing is, a lot of these young guys are going to rely on his leadership because in his lengthy NHL career, he's been to the postseason 9 times. Yes, he's never won a Stanley Cup, but he still has an idea as to what it takes to get there. And the thing is, like, he's not afraid to throw his weight around. He had a lot of hits last season, and that can definitely carry some weight on the Devils' blue line, because one of the complaints that a lot of people have for the Devils roster up and down was that they were just a little too soft, and Dillon can definitely add some of that sandpaper action. He's not really going to see himself in the score sheet all that often, but that's not his role. Similar to what Pesce said during his respective media availability, he's a defensive-minded defenseman, but he knows where to place himself, and the same can be said for Dillon. When you lose veteran pieces like Damon Severson and Ryan Graves, it does have an impact within the team, and it showed for the Devils. Obviously, injuries didn't make things any easier, but veteran leadership is crucial for the Devils, and I have no doubt in the back of my mind that Brenden Dillon is going to play a vital role in that. And during his answer, he talked about his time with the San Jose Sharks, and he had the chance to learn from all-time great Sharks players, including Patrick Marleau, Joe Thornton, Joe Pavelski, and also Brett Burns. And I'm sure a lot of people would love to have that sort of guidance and tutelage, and Dillon can pay it forward. I also asked him the potential that this Devils team has, and I love to ask this question to any big asset that the Devils obtain, because I love to hear their thoughts. Here's what he had to say. You had nothing but positive things to say about your current teammates, and defensive depth and physicality seem to be a big point of emphasis this offseason for the Devils. Now that you and a few other assets have been added to the roster, how much potential does this unit have from your perspective? I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, well, I mean, I probably a little biased, but I feel like we got to be one of the better D crews in the league. I think we got a little bit of mix of everything. We've got some young guys with a lot of skill. We've got some big guys with physicality. I think all 6, 7, 8 of us can skate, and I think that's the biggest thing. Whether you're on the fourth line, or you're the 8th D-man, you've got to be able to move in this league, and that's something that I feel like over the summer and every year I try to incorporate, just for gaps, for having a good stick, for closing and eliminating things in the corners. You've got to be able to do all those, and I think for our D crew, we're going to be a tight group. We're going to make sure we're having lots of fun every day, which we get to play hockey for a living. I mean, what a treat. It's unbelievable. It's the best league in the world. And I think when you kind of have that smile on your face and, you're walking around dressing rooms and skating on the ice with the New Jersey Devil logo on the front of your chest, like it's an honor to be a part of that. And, even the worst days as a hockey player and in the worst days of a season, you got to be able to find the positives and the good times to be able to enjoy that. And, I think from the first pair onto the second, onto the third, we want to continue to push each other to get better every day too. We got to have goals internally of where we want to get to. And, for us as a D-corps, if we can be as good as we can there tonight, it's only going to help our team.
Awesome. That's it for me. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Trey.
All right. I don't know how people feel about the Devils' current roster, and we'll talk more about that in the third segment. But the Devils' defensive pairings will definitely be somewhat interesting because, like I said a few minutes ago, the Devils relied too much on their young guys. Players like Hughes, Nemitz, Hatika, they're still trying to establish their footing in the NHL. And one of the reasons why the Devils' power play struggled is because when you have someone like Hughes or Nemitz trying to control the offensive flow at the top of the point, no team is going to fear their slap shot because they're not really all that developed. And then as the season progressed, we saw a lot of the young guys just get absolutely gassed, but that was projected to happen. And I think the Devils getting someone like Dillon and Pesce, 2 players that can eat up a decent amount of those minutes, can certainly go a long way. And I think the Devils have a good balance, once again, of defensive-minded defensemen, but also some defensemen that can focus on offense. I think that's what also made them so successful during the 2022-2023 season. On the right side, they had Dougie Hamilton, John Marino, and Damon Severson, and it was one of the best right sides in the NHL. I don't think that's a hot take, and the record showed it. And on the left, they had Ryan Graves, Jonas Siegenthaler, Brendan Smith, Kevin Ball, or Luke Hughes. Give or take, like I said in a previous episode, it really depended on the team that they were facing and what the circumstance called for. But the Devils had some interesting defensive pairings to choose from, and I think that's one of the reasons that made them so successful. Now, fast forward to the present day, Siegenthaler, Hamilton, Hughes, Pesce, Dillon, Nemitz. Siegenthaler, Dillon, and Pesce will focus more on the defense. Hamilton, Hughes, and Nemitz will focus more on the offense. And don't underestimate Jonathan Kovacevic, who the Devils obtained from the Montreal Canadiens, because like I said in the previous episode, Kovacevic can get some big blocks and also some big hits, and he adds more options for the Devils when it comes to defense, which is critical. It seems like the Devils roster has improved, and I've been enjoying the moves that Tom Fitzgerald has been making, but I think some people are still a little unsatisfied, and I want to talk about that a little more. All right, in the previous episode, I talked about how Fitzgerald went big game hunting for certain players. And some people left comments saying like, Tom Fitzgerald, he didn't go big game hunting. All he did was add a few solid options, and the Devils roster didn't really improve all that much. Not only did I see that on my YouTube comment section, I also saw that on social media. And I want to address it because, like I said, I think Fitzgerald has been making the correct moves. I talked about it in yesterday's episode. I said that with all the moves that the Devils have been making, they have been replacing a certain need. Okay, what did they need in terms of forwards? They needed to replace Michael McLeod and also Miles Wood, two players who play a blue-collar style of hockey, but can be spark plugs and can get themselves into the score sheet every now and again. And they did that by adding Stefan Nason, who was electrifying with the Hurricanes. And not only that, he did show up come playoff time. In 11 games, he scored 4 goals. He's improved on the power play, and he's not afraid to throw his weight around. And then when we look at Paul Cotter, I still stand by the fact that the Devils gave up a little too much for his services, but Cotter is an aggressive player as well, and he's not afraid to rack up the hits. The big thing he needs to work on is consistency. The Devils replaced McLeod and Wood in that sort of manner. And nobody's ever going to replace Michael McLeod's face-off production. He was just one of a kind, end of story. But in terms of getting more physical, adding more size, and just getting more options up and down their lineup in terms of forwards, that's what the Devils did. And now you add Tomas Tatar to the mix, he sort of replaces Alexander Holtz's goal production. And remember, like I said in segment 1, Tomas Tatar had a plus-minus rating of plus 41 during the 2022-2023 season. Even if he's not scoring, he's still efficient, and the team is better when he's out there, especially if he was paired alongside Nico Hischier. All right, you get more scoring up and down your lineup. Now let's transition over to the blue line. I think the Devils really missed Ryan Graves and Damon Severson's production, because in the final year of Severson's tenure with the Devils, he was always known as an offensive-minded defenseman. But when Dougie Hamilton was healthy, he knew he had to take a bit of a step backwards. He had to take a back seat for the better of the team. And Severson focused more on defense as opposed to offense. He was a bottom 4 defenseman during the 2022-2023 season. As for Ryan Graves, we always knew he was efficient and he was capable of getting his name into the score sheet, but he just knew how to be a good, impactful player, and his plus-minus and his defensive point share ratings reflected that. He was always tops in the NHL in both of those categories. Devils lost both of them in free agency last year. Damon Severson, sign and trade with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Ryan Graves, Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm hearing it's not going all that well in Pittsburgh for Graves, but that's a discussion for another time. The Devils really missed them, and they traded away Colin Miller to the Winnipeg Jets, who was arguably one of their better defensive-minded defensemen this past season. What do the Devils do? They get Brett Pesce and also Brenden Dillon, two guys who focus more on defense. And Pesci, not the most physical guy. Dillon, very physical. A good dynamic, if you ask me. Kovacevic replaces Kevin Ball and gives the Devils more options on their bottom four defensive pairings. He won't play in all the games, but Kovacevic was an underrated trade, in my opinion. Then let's look at the goaltending. People were always telling Tom Fitzgerald to trade for a goalie. And I always said that if the Devils want a goalie, they might have to sacrifice a decent amount of assets, and that was what I was fearing. Look at the contract that UC Soros signed with the Nashville Predators. Look at the contract that Connor Hellebuck signed with the Winnipeg Jets last summer. And look what the Senators had to give up to the Boston Bruins to get Linus Ullmark. They had to sacrifice their first-round pick in this year's draft. And the Devils had the 10th overall pick. Were they going to sacrifice that for a goalie? I think Tom Fitzgerald did a decent job in getting Jacob Markstrom, who wasn't the best goalie, but I think he's an upgrade over Kaapo Kähkönen. I think he'll be an upgrade over Vitek Vanecek. He's had his name in the running for the Vezina Trophy before. He finished runner-up a couple seasons ago. He led the league in shutouts a couple years ago as well. I think Markstrom is a solid addition for the Devils roster. So when I'm seeing on social media people saying that Tom Fitzgerald isn't cooking, look, I know that a lot of people were probably having their eyes set on Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Tkachuk, Steven Stamkos, whoever. There were also reports saying that the Devils were open to trading away their 10th overall pick for Martin Necas. Look, I get it. I love all those players, and they can definitely provide a spark offensively in more ways than one, and they are capable of racking up the points. But here's the problem. The Devils' offense was never an issue. You got Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Timo Meier, and maybe Dawson Mercer. We're still waiting on how his contract situation is going to unfold. And you get Tomas Tatar back as well. I think Erik Haula is also a very underrated goal scorer. Getting goals, getting points, that was never the Devils' issue. What they had to do was get grittier, more physical, and they do that by adding Stefan Noesen. They do that by adding Paul Cotter. And on the defensive side of things, I think they upgraded their blue line, getting Dillon and also Pesci, and Kovacevic underrated. I think the Devils did just fine during the free agency period, and I'm happy with the moves that Tom Fitzgerald has been making. Hasn't been perfect, let me just put that out there, but I think Fitzgerald is a man of his word, and he went big game hunting. What was the ultimate goal for the Devils this offseason? I think it was to find a decent head coach. They did that, Sheldon Keefe, and also get a good goalie, Jacob Markstrom. I think if anyone had to choose between getting an offensive caliber player, a better defenseman, or a better goalie, I guarantee you, most of the results will say get a goalie, and that's what the Devils did. They got Jacob Markstrom, who is solid, and he still has a couple years remaining on his contract. We'll see how that unfolds, but the Devils didn't have to sacrifice too much to get his services. I think Tom Fitzgerald has been cooking during the offseason. I think people should be grateful for what he's been doing and trying to fix the issues. Once again, here are some needs for the Devils this offseason: physicality, experience, a head coach, and goaltending. And that's exactly what Fitzgerald did. Down the road, could he get one of his family members, Brady Tkachuk, added to the roster? I have my doubts, but we'll see what happens. But for the time being, I think Fitzgerald has done a wonderful job in free agency. But let me know what you think. Do you think Fitzgerald has been doing a good job to start free agency? And who would you like to see the Devils add? Could they add another top six asset? I'm sure they could, but I would rather them focus on Dawson Mercer and see if they could get that bridge contract working. But we'll see what happens. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X-Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X-Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.